Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
I've got Mark at home with me today. He's here in Victoria for the next couple of weeks while he runs some intensive 6-day clinics before heading to the States in May. Mark, this podcast session has some really intriguing questions in it. I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. This week, I'm going to ask you to share your advice on how to navigate changes in training, how we can set our highly anxious horses up to search better, as well as how to best introduce a bit. Mark, the first question today comes from Andrea. She is moving into carriage driving. Her saddle horses have been started and ridden and retrained without driving pressure. But now she's concerned because they have to respond from pressure behind them as they do miles of long lining and eventually get in between the shafts. They also have to be extremely obedient for safety's sake, so there are somewhat tighter boundaries for enabling questioning behaviour. So she asks them to do something. She really needs them to be able to respond. And she's wanting to know what your thoughts might be in taking this into consideration when navigating their change in training.
I just want to make clear, everyone, driving and driving pressure. So carriage driving versus sometimes when people think, I don't use driving pressure to direct horses. Driving pressure that I use to direct horses, or not to direct, the driving pressure that I don't use is I'm not pushing a horse away and sending them off away from pressure with their thoughts focused on the pressure. But I'm all about getting the horse to think forward and also from a stimulant from any different angle, whether that be, you pull on a belly rope and the horse moves forward to the feel of the belly rope, and that would get a horse used to following the feel of a leg. I do guide horses. I'll have a flag on their rump, even a long stick with a flag on it, whatever, and I'll just rustle or bump the flag over their hip or over their back or anywhere to sort of stimulate a stimulant that could be something that says, can you move forward when you feel that stimulant, until that movement turns into a nice forward thought and the horse can go forward. So basically encouraging a forward thought from stimulant at all different angles is really important. Just the idea that a horse is moving away from something to make that thing release all the time, and it's constantly sort of in that sort of, where's the pressure coming from? I try and get people to think about and discourage that in training. So when you're moving to directing horses in long lines and driving pressure, it's really important that they do understand boundaries, and this is where the long lining that I do in the two reins, which then sort of goes to, them understanding the shafts is really important. So firstly, when you're directing a horse in the long lines, one thing I firstly do is have them understand the boundaries of the reins. So basically I have a little saying when someone says, am I right to go out the gate in the long reins? I say, well, when you can tie the reins around your neck. And they sort of go, oh, but I'm not going to do that. And I go, well, you're not. But if you could feel that your horse is so comfortable within those reins that they're not going to push and fight and squirm and worry, then you can tie the reins around your neck and you should feel safe technically. So basically in long lining, I do lots of circles and get the horse to sort of move within the reins until basically what's happening is they don't know how to get into trouble, and if they ever did, they knew how to get out of trouble because their mobility and movement and proprioception in those reins is really, really good. So firstly, they're moving within the feel of the reins, so you're constantly moving from side to side, getting them to back up, and then also having long periods of standing, like you said in the question. I want to stop at the lights or the stop sign or something. I want to know the horse can stand quietly and know that it's within the shafts and it can stand quietly and wait. So basically that's all the work that I do in the long lines. I just basically get them so comfortable within those reins that when those reins stop and are still, the horse finds the path of least resistance, which is the middle of the reins, which then becomes the middle of the shafts, and they can stand comfortably within that space. The biggest thing before you put horses into shafts is the ability to move softly between those boundaries. not just get rigid in those boundaries and worry, much like a horse in a smaller horse float starts to freeze and then scramble around the corners because they don't know how to move and balance and adjust in between those tight boundaries. So that's where the long reining is really good. And I do that in a side pull and a halter first, so they're not pulling on their mouth when I'm adjusting them and adjusting their hindquarters and forequarters inside and their whole body inside the reins. And then if you want, your cues, you can use whatever, some people have different sort of cues in cart driving. But basically, if you've got a long stick or something, or a flag on a long stick that might be a go forward aid, then basically you just sort of, either you tap or you bump, and you might have a voice cue that goes with that to say, walk, and the horse walks and gets a forward thought and walks off. So you can eventually teach your horse to drive forward to the feel of a long stick from its back end, much like a net leg aid. It's no different really. But what I also like to do before I get the horses to go forward off an aid, like a stick aid or a flag on a stick or something they can feel, which then could turn into a voice aid, would be can they search from leading forward in the reins? So that's when I just walk around the side of their rib cage and get them to sort of move their hindquarter around in a forward motion until they find a forward movement, and just be very comfortable at walking softly out in between the reins before I start to sort of send them out from another feel from behind. But basically, what I say to a lot of people at clinics now that, some people are getting back into riding, some people are not as agile as they used to be, and they're starting a horse and they're a bit nervous, or they've got a horse that they bought that are a bit nervous to ride out because it's had a few sort of, things that made them frightened and they don't want to get hurt. I say, well, why don't you just do long reining until you got the perfect cart horse, which means is you can go out in those long reins anywhere, and that horse is comfortable in those boundaries, can go anywhere. And then when you got the perfect cart horse, all it has to do is get used to you sitting on it. But the perfect cart horse is completely aware of its boundaries and very comfortable with those boundaries, and can sort of and has the patience and the mindset to cope with that softly without getting worried. And they're not over impulsive. They've got enough caution to know exactly where they are. They're not got that paranoia and what's going on over there, They learn to be very centered. So basically that long lining is really good for that.
So when she said that she was concerned about the level of obedience that carriage driving, you have to have for safety reasons with these horses, and yet you talk about things like search and giving horses the opportunity to make decisions. Is there a conflict there at all, or is it more about getting the horses comfortable with the pressure of the carriage?
I use the word obedience in training. It's a necessity. Obedience is what saves a horse's life, as well as our own life. So basically, if a horse gets a fright in a float, or tied up or coming out of a float and the rope's accidentally hooked up or something like that, the only thing that saves that horse's life is to be able to come forward to that leading pressure and think, not panic and pull back. So basically, obedience is essential, but how we get our obedience is important. That we're still got a thinking soft horse, but basically to get good obedience in horses is basically you just show them that there's certain boundaries that, initially the boundaries might be further apart, but at the end of the day, the boundaries are black and white, that you can't push through that boundary. And then eventually those boundaries become a little closer together, so the horse understands the boundaries that it's working within, but quite comfortable with that. And I think obedience is just, as I say, it's working within boundaries until the horse is very calm and adjustable, but knows exactly where it's supposed to be.
You mentioned panicking in that answer. The next question is from Natal, and she has a pony, a cob cross pony, who's now 13 years old, who has a really high flight response, which I guess is a panic. And so her response to the panicking is to literally bolt. And Natal would like to know how she can set her up to be in a better mindset to do things like search and bring her, back to a centered place. I'm going to give you a bit of a background on her. It's an interesting story. So this pony was started under saddle at around 5 with her breeder. Apparently did quite well before being sold as a brood mare who never got into foal, and was then sold again to an interstate trainer who this lady then bought her from. And when she was passed on to her, she was described as an unmotivated child's dressage horse, more suited to trails, too lazy to canter. I'll just underline that bit, that she was sold as a child's horse. When she arrived, she was very mistrusting, and she had a sore gut, and she was also had healing girth galls. And she realised that she wasn't obviously the horse that she had been sold. She's gone through your program though, and now sort of describes her as highly sensitive, a high flight horse who's had some trauma or significant fear in her history. When she's unsure or she feels trapped, she doesn't freeze, she runs. She's now had her for about 6 months. She used to be almost completely untouchable in the paddock, but now she can approach her and she seeks a connection, and she lets her put the halter on. Very easily startled though, and her reactions tend to be very fast and big. She has bolted and she's come off out of the saddle. She's got a fright on the ground and she's run through her. So she's been working on trust and groundwork and keeping things simple, mostly keeping them in hand, but she has yet to be able to get her to relax long enough to sort of do anything on the long line or to get her to search. She's very conscious that anything she does feels like she's trying to drive her. So what she's trying to struggle with, this is what we'd like to hear from you, Mark, is how she can get her to stay a bit mentally present for longer. So it's not just that she's spooky, this is Natal's words here, she comes very over the threshold very quickly, and she can't easily come back down. She can feel her tension building, but she's just not sure how to get that to release, and so that she can set her up to be better to search. She's very committed to helping her to learn and to get through this process, but she's just wondering, is it her skill set, is it her timing, and what tips have you got for her, please?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, sadly, a common occurrence where I get the sensitive little ponies come to clinics, or sensitive sort of cob style ponies that are really, really frightened and have been trained, and I guess the unfortunate thing is sometimes too, it's easy to manhandle little horses, and sometimes they do get a bit manhandled, like, by the sounds of the girth galls and everything like that. I've found some of them, they've been quite flooded, and then because they've been quite flooded, they tend to be subdued and a bit more, shut down. And then when you get them home, they kind of open up, and all the worry that was in there comes out because it never got worked through properly. By the sounds of it, like I had a little horse at the last clinic, very, very similar, sort of little pony. I think the horse trainer might have given up on him because I think they might have get a bit frightened and got bucked off. But chronic fear of driving pressure, because he was already a sensitive horse and sent round. So, the need to get out on that circle fast and face up was so strong that it was very hard to sort of say, hey, okay, think through pressure and don't just kind of move away and run away from pressure. And the chances are, your horse has had a bit of all that as well. So when you've applied pressure, the memory comes up with what's supposed to do, and then you've got this paranoia around people and energy. And so the first few things I'd think about really doing is look at, starting off the process of my energy's not frightening, okay? And this is going to be a bit of a tough lesson because your horse will have to go through a certain amount of freeze and fear to get through this, but you have to get through it because you can't quieten a fearful horse with memories. You have to address what's making them frightened and fix it and not just kind of, relax them and quieten them. Because the world's just going to sort of, it's just going to be a massive mosh pit and they're not going to survive in it emotionally because of all the things that they have to go through as an undersaddle, riding horse. So the first thing I would say, if your horse is that nervous and wary, have it in a fairly, have it on a long rope to start with, and just start to move around as per normal, as in a person who maybe doesn't have a strong idea about horse psychology and emotions, which sounds a bit, a bit blunt, but what I'm saying is you can walk around normally. A lot of times we tune ourselves into these sensitive horses and we become like a sensitive horse guru that knows how to soften step back and do the right things and ask the right questions so we don't get a rise in anxiety that the horse can't cope with. I think the first thing your horse has got to get used to is you move about like this and you walk up to your horse at a certain speed, and it's going to run backwards a bit, it's going to freeze, but then you just might walk to an area that's not going to spin and kick, but it'll freeze a little, and you just touch and go and leave and walk as far as away you can to the end of the rope. It might be a 6 metre rope, and then you just walk away leading your horse somewhere and then turn around and just walk up into it again. It'll run backwards a little bit, you might put a little hold on it, and then you just touch it and leave again, and you do that 50, 60 times if you have to. And what you'll start to notice is, because you're not in there for very long, you're only in there for sort of a second, and then you're gone again. So the horse comes out of freeze very quickly and goes, what's going on? But it survived that, in its mind, it just survived that near-death experience until it realises, well, actually, you just walked up to me fast, and then you left again and nothing happened. And over so many times, the horse goes, oh, you're not really going to do anything to me, are you? You're not. Your energy's not scary. I think you have to address that first lesson first before you go into any other areas, because if you don't do that, the rise and fall of your energy all the time is going to sort of influence your horse, and then you've got belly ropes and you've got saddles and you've got all this other paraphernalia that you're going to be putting on the horse and all the leading stuff that you've got to get the paranoia about our energy out of your horse so they can soften and trust us more. And then they can start to trust the trimmers and the farriers and the other people that are going to come and sort of handle your horse, or an environment where there's lots of people around. So most horses that are that nervous, especially those little ponies, I tend to go through that process first. And after a few days of that, I've seen some remarkable changes in horses that are very fearful start to go, yeah, it's not a problem. I don't have to be worried about energy.
Okay, so we know that she's got a very, very quick flight response. So you said put her on a lead to do this. What should she do if she just takes a couple of quick steps and that's it, she goes?
Just keep a hold of her.
Keep a hold of her.
And I know it does. It's going to look a bit sort of like I'm holding this horse and she can't get away and she's going to freeze. But I bet my left boot that the horse has been sent as well as, sent off pressure as well. So it has had handling, it has had a saddle on it, it has had a rider on it. So it has gone through a lot more trauma when it was kind of shut down. So the fact that it's wanting to run away is just a natural instinct, but all you have to do is touch and go. You're not going to stay in it, you're not going to stay on it, you're not going to stay right close to it so it stays in that frozen state. It's just the approach of a person at just a normal speed. Don't go too crazy and run up to them, but just a normal speed that's not like that quiet horse guru speed that you're trying to touch a wild brumby. And get it so you can approach it at different angles. Start at the safe angles first, not the hindquarter area, until you can sort of walk in from any angle and just touch and go until she goes, right, this is okay. And then you can start doing some other things with her. The other thing is, basically you have to, because that'll stimulate her anxiety and then take her out. So she goes up and then she'll come down, she'll go up and she'll come down. And then you'll probably have to do things like create a negative tension, but not too much, and then get her to find an answer. So it could be, I might shake the flag and she's going to go, I'm terrified of that. So don't shake it till she, jumps a fence. But then you might just walk away with the flag and pick up a feel of a lead rope, and she might go, I'll follow that. And until she goes, I can do something when that pressure's on, until, I'm not so worried about that pressure. And it's not personal. So basically, once all those pressures become not personal, she'll be able to cope with pressure.
What do you mean by they're not personal?
Well, it's like the initial pressure of us walking up to a horse in a hurry. Oh no, I've got to get away. That person wants to attack me. No, I don't. I just want to go up and touch you because I think you're a legend. So
keep your emotions really kind of quite level.
Your emotions are always level. Just because a bomb goes up doesn't mean you're throwing the bomb at the horse. So you're not throwing grenades at your horse. The horse might see that flag as, that's a danger, and I need to be in Queensland to get away from it, and I'm in Victoria. No, it's just a flag. It's your perception of that, and I'm not going to chase you with it. Oh, you're not going to chase me with it. You're not a threat. You've walked up with your energy. I haven't run away from your energy. I'm not frightened of your energy anymore. You don't chase me around. Oh, it's just a scary object.
So if I was to walk up to a horse and sort of in my mind go, I'm really not a threat, Or if I was to walk up to a horse and go, I want to attack you and kill you right now, do you reckon the horse can notice the difference?
Well, a lot of horses, a lot of people walk up to a horse with a smile inside, but because they're walking in a hurry and they're not reading their horse's emotions, the horse still thinks they're a threat because just their energy, the body language. I think a horse really reads the body language more than the intention, but your intention all the time is to help your horse feel better, never to do anything other than that. So, and they start to recognise that after a while you walk up in a hurry, your energy's big, but your intention has a smile. So I think the horses get used to that. But even the calmest minded people might have a bit of a busy walk about them, and that frightens their horses.
Yeah, so it's not enough. We have to get them through into the level where they can start to trust, and that trust they've kind of gone through a process that it's almost like that trust has been earned. They figure it out themselves, and that's when it's really quite a solid trust.
Yes.
Okay, so I hope that gives you some ideas, Natal. Let us know how she's going. She sounds like a fabulous pony, and it's a nice story that you've got. I'm glad you've come on board with Mark. We wish you all the best with her, and thank you for really trying to make a change for her. I think she's going to respond quite well for you. The next question, Mark, comes from Sivi from Canada, who has been working with a 10-year-old ex-lesson schooling mare. Now, Sivi describes herself as a bit of a beginner, and so this horse that she's pretty sure is a little bit shut down, she's had now for a few months, and very, very curious, very patient and very kind. If she's a little bit startled, she will tend to jump backwards, but she's never really been a problem to Sivi at all. Sivi's just wanting to do things in the right way herself, and she's been doing a lot of leading and trying to get that right. She's watched the video on how to quiet an anxious mare and found that very helpful. But now she'd like to learn a little bit more about how she can progress with her horse, perhaps in real-world situations, or should she stay in an enclosed space like the arena? She understands there's pros and cons for both, but should she was she just wondering what your advice would be and where she goes from here, and should she also bring in another calm horse into either of those spaces?
Very, very relevant question, and I think to answer it, I will just go on what I see as the common denominator in the way people operate their horses that I'm helping them with. So the common denominator is a lot of people expose their horses and slowly do certain exercises, and then get to a stage that they want to ride out from the safe place. What can you do with your horse in the safe place? That's the question I'll ask. And do you notice that you have a set rhythm and routine in the way you do things? Do I always pull the rein at this speed? Do I always do this? Do I always back up and only ask for 3 steps at a certain speed? Do I always go walk and then I go for a little trot and then I might try a little canter and then am I always in this sort of set rhythm? So what I used to do starting horses before I rode out, if I was, especially the ones I was more concerned about, that I had a gut feel that I've really got to get some, things ironed out in this horse before I get out in the big bad world. So the big bad world has got big bad wolves that are going to scare your horse, and because there's all these other things that you can't control out there, apart from the one thing could be the separation anxiety. The anxiety that causes separation anxiety when they see a mob of, I think in Canada you might see a mob of elk or something like that, and then your horse gets worried, and then all of a sudden you're going to be a bit more frantic, pull on the reins quicker. So the first thing I want you to think about before you stay in a safe environment, but do things at a faster speed, a little bit faster rhythm, ask for things a bit more immediately, just like if a horse float goes around a corner, a horse trailer goes around a corner, a horse has to balance immediately. Otherwise, they'll fall over, especially if the driver wasn't thinking and they forgot they had horses on board. The horses don't have time. They have to live in that moment of, this is happening right now, what do I do? So in riding and working your horse, you have to get them in the moment and change your rhythm. If you think you've got a rhythm and get them to go faster, think a bit faster, turn a little bit faster, and see how they cope with that. If your questions and your suggestions or your guidance is causing them anxiety when you do it in a bit more of a hurry or something like that, or a bit more sort of immediate, then you know that if they're out, they get a fright, and you go, oh, don't get a fright, come over here. that's going to be way too much information. So basically, get your horse soft and ask for a little bit more in the yards. And, I would like to think you could get your horse walk, trot and canter and have them really going up and then coming back down again, and then going up and then coming back down again, and then chuck a Yui and go over there, and I'll back up here, I've got to rattle a gate, and then I've got to go and pick up a raincoat, or, just do things that really get that horse thinking and see how it copes. If that rattles your horse too much and it gets really worried, well then there's no point going outside and letting the rest of the world scare your horse, and then you try and help it with tools that you can only go at a certain speed with. So if you can sort of think about that, practice that first, and then just go out away a bit and then come back again, and then just test that exposure, see how the horse goes with exposure. But you've got to know through your guidance you can get out of trouble in a hurry, and the horse will let go of a strong thought immediately and go, I'm okay with that. Not you're half getting it in the yards and then hoping when you get outside it's going to be better.
Okay, your next question, and the last one for this session, Mark, is some tips on how you can best introduce a bit. Fiona is finding the task of teaching her young filly a little bit daunting. She's wondering what the best way and the best time is to introduce it. She knows that your masterclass, you mentioned that you ride them for some time in a halter. She is very receptive off the head collar, but she's just wondering how they move forward from here.
Nowadays, versus when I used to train horses full time, I used to have a shorter period to introduce a bit, and I had no problems. I still went like a halter and rode them bitless a bit, and then I'd go into a bit. But then they were kind of safe to ride by the time I put the bit in, and they weren't pulling and squirming as much. So if you spend a bit of time already in a halter, the thing I would go to is a side pull, like a bitless bridle with the reins come off the side, because that's sort of the side reins that you would have on a snaffle bit, like one each side, and that sort of would be closer to riding in a bit than riding in a halter, in the sense of the pulling of the rein on the side of their face coming from one side and the other. And then once your horse is good and nice and balanced, the reason I would rather ride bitless is because my rein work has changed over the years to get more balance, that the rein goes all the way through to the hind end, all the way to the ground, through the way the horse thinks and balances in the rein, opposed to being a bit more flexy and using my legs on a bit more. So basically, what I would be doing is make sure all those things work really well, and you can back up, you can steer. The horse is not fighting when it's in the bend; it's finding its balance really well. Then you know that the horse is completely comfortable carrying you and following the rein. Then we've just got to add the mouthpiece. So the mouthpiece is something you can introduce quietly each day. Just let them hold and carry the bit, and just let them have time carrying the bit. Let them drink a bit of water, eat a little bit in the bit, because they're always going to have a bit of graze in the bit sometime, and just get them used to carrying it. And what you can do is you can ride your horse while it carries the bit. So you can go on a ride in the paddock trail ride, and the horse just carries the bit in its mouth, but you're still using the halter, knowing that you can still ride in the side pull. The side pull's a little bit, can get in the way a little bit of the bridle and the bit, so the halter's a little less in the way. So you can ride your horse around while it carries a bit, and it's used to that. And there's different ways of going about it. Sometimes I might just steer the horse around a little bit, and then I'll just get just on the ground, just get them to follow the rein around on the ground, an inside rein while they're walking around me, pulling on the bit, and then just slowly introduce me riding them in a bit. And I might, you can have two reins there where you can sort of pull, so it pulls the however you set it up with a rein and a bit at the same time, so you get a little bit more of a bend from the halter, and then you can pull the bit at the same time. So the horse is starting to go, I can feel the bit, but I've still got that guidance of the halter. And it doesn't take long for the horse to recognise that it can feel that pressure on the outside of its mouth, and then you wait till you get that thought change and let them follow that rein around until you can get the same feeling of bends in the bit that you would when you're riding in a side pull. So I'm talking about halter, side pull and bit, and I hope I don't get you confused. Is if the horse can be ridden in a side pull, the bit transfer is going to be easier, but you can ride in a halter while the horse has got a bit in their mouth and still use that halter rein to steer them as well. It's just that they can work and understand all of those three things. The side pull's going to pull from the side a bit more. The bit's going to be lower and pull from the side more in their mouth. But once they're comfortable carrying the bit and they can yield off that pressure, and they know that pressure, and the other thing is with your hands, when you're working your horses, get round their muzzle and get them to yield from the hand a little bit. So you push them across a little bit in the hand and push them this way and that way in the hand, and they get used to yielding to the sides near their mouth. And then, it's very easy. And as long as you're in a confined space, they don't have any strong thoughts that you've got to catch them with their mouth too early. And then after a few days of riding and steering, you're going to get them to start backing up. And as I say, you can have the halter on and the bit and take a little bit of bit pressure halter, get them to back up until eventually you wean off the halter completely and they're backing in the reins. And then once they're going good, once everything's weaned off them, you have to know that they can respond to the bit like leading. They will go with it. It's not just a cue that they think, the halter will come in to play if I wait long enough. So soon enough, you don't want the halter, you want them to just lead in that bit.
Yeah, I remember watching you getting horses to, when they'd been ridden a few times in the bit, you'd get them to try and back up in the bit, and you'd always start backing them up in the halter, then do the bit, then the halter, then the bit, and you sort of until they were comfortable with it. It did that was a difficult one. I remember that, but you used to put the bit on quite loosely when it was first. You'd never put it on, where it normally sit. You actually would have it a little bit lower in their mouth, didn't you? So they could get their tongue over and under it. Is that right?
Yeah, so the thing is because
they do play with it.
Yeah, there's different ideas on how high a bit sits, how many wrinkles in their mouth. And I used to let them play with it, as in, some trainers ride with quite a loose bit so they can put their tongue over and under and over and under. If you do it up too tight to start with, then they might get the tongue over, they can't get it back under, or they struggle and they worry a bit. So basically they can put their tongue over and under, and then slowly you get it up to a comfortable height. Like, there's different theories on it. I don't like it pulled up tight against their lips, because you're just wasting a feel in there by pressing. So I just like loosening it till it's just hanging below the lip, but not too loose in their mouth. I know some people like it really loose, but I don't want it to become something that they're constantly kind of getting distracted playing with all the time. I'd like them to play with it to get used to it, but then when they have a quiet mind, they have a quiet mouth, and they're just listening to the feel of it guide them.
When they have a quiet mind, they have a quiet mouth. So used to use a little bit as well that had copper in it that tasted nice.
Yeah, I used to sort of, and that was all stuff that was back then. I think I was sort of, someone would say, a bit of copper in their mouth's good, and a bit of this and a bit of that, or twisted wire bits. They used to get a bit rusty, give them something to, like saliva. I've gone off all those theories a bit now,
right.
and I just want a comfortable bit to fit in their mouth, and they, the idea of slobber and soft mouth comes from a soft-minded horse, not a horse that's playing with the bit all the time to create. Softness is not in the amount of moisture in their mouth, as in, you don't want a dry mouth in a horse, but you don't need all this sort of a really, really wet mouth to have a soft mouth. It's more the contact of that feel on the horse and how it processes that. So a hard mouth is a hard mind. So how strong is that thought to go forward? Well, it's not, when a horse pulls on the reins, it's only pushing a thought. So the weight of what you feel in the rein is only the weight of the horse's thought, and how strong that thought is and how unwilling it is to let go of it.
And generally speaking, pretty much all horses take bits incredibly well, don't they? They don't actually react to it in the way that a saddle might cause a horse to have a bucking episode. The bit doesn't cause a horse to rear. They actually just tend to get on with it. Is that right?
I've seen a few horses over the years get a bit shaky in the head and get a bit panicky, but all the horses that I've put bits in, they've really been pretty good with it, like in comparison to a saddle that really restricts them. The other thing also that's really good, which I didn't mention for everybody out there with young horses and foals, and one day wanting to put a bit in their mouth, is just when you're working with your lead rope, just put your lead rope in your horse's mouth a lot. And I can get a young horse that I'm teaching how to lead, just pick up a bit of lead rope in their mouth and start to get them to back up from a lead rope in their mouth, so they get used to having something in their mouth. And at least with a rope, it's kind of not clangy on their teeth, and it's kind of soft in their mouth. And so you can get them working from the mouth just with a lead rope, just playing around with the lead rope around their head, like around their pole, goes all the way around through their mouth, and you can just guide them with that. And then by the time you put the steel in their mouth, they're used to having and being guided from something in their mouth. And you can just do that every day with your lead horse, just before you even think about riding it, like, just part of leading.
Good luck with it, Fiona. I hope you don't have any dramas. I hope it goes smoothly for you. It sounds like it shouldn't be a huge ordeal. And I hope your horse takes to it well. Thank you so much for all the questions that have come through from all the members this week. It's been a really interesting discussion with Mark, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like it, share it, or send us a comment. It all helps in reaching new ears and helping more horses. And if making a change in your horse appeals to you, Mark offers his direct support and a diverse learning platform. Head to marklangley.com.au and grab your 7-day free trial.